Today's lesson is A Thirst for History. Hello, everyone. I'm Roger.
And I'm Helen.
And today we're going to talk about beverages and where they came from. Now, water is pretty simple. It just comes from the ground, or we can get it from rainfall and stuff like that. That's the most basic beverage there is. But there are some other beverages out there that we enjoy on a day-to-day basis, like Pocari Sweat and like iced tea, for example, or coffee, and even 7-Up and Coca-Cola.
That's right. So we're talking mainly about beverages that are manufactured. So in the past, our beverages consisted of coffee or tea or juices. Iced tea, for instance, would be a cold beverage. But these days, we have manufactured drinks like Pocari Sweat, 7-Up, and Coca-Cola. And these drinks usually have a very particular flavor, a combination of different flavors that give it a kick, a particular feeling when you drink it.
Yeah, they're fizzy drinks. We also call them carbonated beverages. Some people like fizzy drinks, some people don't. I had a friend when I was a kid who just could not drink Coke or 7-Up or Dr. Pepper because the fizziness made his throat hurt. I just can't drink that stuff, Roger. I just hated it. It's so painful to drink that stuff. He always had juice and water and tea and stuff like that. But some people do like fizzy drinks. Are you a fan of fizzy drinks like Coke and 7-Up and Dr. Pepper?
Yeah, I am actually. I like to drink fizzy drinks before a meal because it makes me feel less hungry. So if you're on a diet, it's actually a good idea to drink something fizzy because it fills up your stomach and it makes you eat less.
Okay, so if you like fizzy drinks, today's program is for you because we're going to talk about the origins of 7-Up and Coca-Cola. So let's get to it, everybody. Let's find out where 7-Up came from right now.
7-Up. The lemon-lime beverage 7-Up was developed back in 1929 as an alternative to Coca-Cola and other popular sodas. In fact, in the early years, it was advertised as Uncola. Its secret ingredient was lithium citrate, which is now used as a medicine to help balance moods. So perhaps that's where the up in the name comes from. It cheers you up. And what does 7 mean? One theory is that the drink contained 7 ingredients when it was first manufactured.
各位好，第一部分我们看到单字 manufacture 这个字是动词，指制造、生产。例如 The company's products were manufactured in India because it was cheaper. 那家公司的产品在印度制造，因为比较便宜。或是 Children's toys will be manufactured at the new factory. 儿童玩具将会在新厂房生产。另外，这个字的字尾加上 r 就成了名词 manufacturer， 意思是制造商。像是 The clothing manufacturer was fined a lot of money for safety violations in his factory. 这家成衣制造商因工厂违反安全规定而被罚以巨款。再补充一个相关名词 manufacturing, M-A-N-U-F-A-C-T-U-R-I-N-G, manufacturing, 意思是制造业。我们可以说 One of the country's key industries is bicycle manufacturing. 该国重要的产业之一是脚踏车制造业。
So first of all, we're going to talk about 7-Up. And 7-Up is the lemon-lime beverage. And it was developed back in 1929 as an alternative to Coca-Cola and other popular sodas. So right off the bat, we're told how 7-Up tastes. It's a lemon-lime beverage, so it consists of a lemon and lime flavor. So lime here refers to a citrus fruit that is similar to a lemon, but with the difference being that lime has green skin.
Exactly. So that's what this drink is comprised of or composed of. Those are the ingredients of 7-Up. I suppose we should explain something first here because I think a lot of our younger listeners may not know what 7-Up is. Okay, that was kind of the original lemon-lime beverage, and Sprite kind of took over in the 1980s or the 1990s. 1990s, and 7-Up pretty much disappeared, although I think it's still out there somewhere. When I was a kid, 7-Up was very popular. I remember my father always having before dinner cocktail. It was Scotch and 7, Scotch whiskey mixed with 7-Up. That was his favorite cocktail before dinner. But yeah, we're talking about 7-Up. And again, it's a lemon lime beverage.
Right. So 7-Up has a very similar taste to Sprite, but it's more difficult to find here in Taiwan. But originally 7-Up was invented as an alternative to Coca-Cola. And here, alternative means something that you can choose instead of something else. So for instance, I could say the restaurant offered only Coke or water as a beverage and no other alternatives.
Exactly, the alternative. Okay, so we were originally planning to go to the ocean today, but the weather's bad. So as an alternative, we're going to go to karaoke and have fun indoors. Here, they thought, hey, everyone's drinking Coke. They need something else. We need more variety. And so they developed it as another choice, as an alternative. And in fact, in the early years, it was advertised as Uncola. Yeah, I remember that. I remember those commercials on TV. 7-Up is the Uncola. It's not cola, it's the Uncola. So yeah, you might like this.
Right. So one appeal of 7-Up might be the fact that it's clear. It's not dark, brown, or black like Coca-Cola. So it might seem more refreshing and it might appeal to people who are not interested in drinking Coca-Cola. So its secret ingredient, the secret ingredient of 7-Up, was lithium citrate, which is now used as a medicine to help balance moods.
You learn something new every day. I did not know that. So, I think I'll try some 7-Up if I ever feel blue or if I feel down in the dumps. So, again, that is a particular chemical that I suppose can make you feel better. And in case you wanted to know, the Chinese for that is Ningmeng Swanli. Lithium citrate, and they use it as a medicine to help balance people's moods. Okay, some people feel sad or maybe too excited, so you want people to have a balanced mood so they don't have these mood swings and they're stable and they can work and stuff like that. So perhaps that's where the up in the name comes from. It cheers you up. Yes, if we talk about being up, that means we're happy, and if you feel down, you're kind of sad.
And what does 7 mean in 7-Up? Well, one theory is that the drink contained 7 ingredients when it was first manufactured. So manufacture here means to make something in large quantities and usually in a factory. And it's true, 7-Up and Coca-Cola, Pocari Sweat are all manufactured in large volume in factories.
Okay, that brings us to the end of the first part of our lesson. Let's move on now to the next part and talk about Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola. The oldest and perhaps most famous of all the drinks out there is Coca-Cola. It was invented by a pharmacist in 1886 from his own syrup recipe. He mixed his syrup with soda water and began selling the drink at a local soda fountain for 5 cents a glass. It wasn't until 1916 that the drink began to be sold in the famous bottle that bulges outward. Nowadays, you're more likely to see Coca-Cola in a can or plastic bottle, but many swear that Coca-Cola always tastes better in a glass bottle.
第二部分我们看到名词 pharmacist 意思是药剂师。举例来说 Kendall went to the pharmacist and got some medication to treat her flu. Kendall 去药剂师那里拿了一些药治疗她的流感。接着我们看到单字 syrup 这个字是名词，意思是糖浆，像是 maple syrup M-A-P-L-E maple syrup 就是指枫糖浆。例如I love pancakes, especially when they are covered in delicious maple syrup. 我喜欢松饼，特别是当它们有淋上好吃的枫糖浆。再来，我们看到动词 bulge 指凸起、鼓起。例如 Tim packed so much clothing into his suitcase that it was bulging. Tim 装了太多衣服，导致行李箱凸起。或是 Jan's pockets were bulging because she had a lot of candy in them. Jan 的口袋鼓起来，因为里面装了很多糖果。接下来我们看到单字 outward 这个字是副词，指向外的、朝外的。例如 Rather than sliding to one side, This type of window opens outward. 这种窗户不是往旁边拉开，而是向外推开。另外，这个字也可以当形容词，指外在的、表面的，像是 His outward expression of happiness hid anger and disgust. 他表面上很快乐，却隐藏了愤恨的情绪。
And welcome back. So we have talked about Pocari Sweat. In the other lesson, we have talked about 7-Up. And now we're going to talk about Coca-Cola, which is perhaps the most popular soft drink out there in the world. And it says here, the oldest and perhaps most famous of all the drinks out there is Coca-Cola. Indeed. It was invented by a pharmacist in 1886 from his own syrup recipe.
Syrup. Wow. Okay, so we did talk about pharmaceuticals earlier in our lesson, at least last time when we were talking about the origin of Pocari Sweat. So here we've got a pharmacist, somebody who deals with pharmaceuticals. And in this particular case, I guess this guy was running a drugstore or a pharmacy, and he invented this particular drink in the year 1886, and he had his own recipe. A recipe, of course, is a set of instructions on how to make a certain kind of food, or in this case, a certain kind of beverage. But this is a syrup here. A syrup is something that's kind of gooey and it flows slowly, like maple syrup for your pancakes, for example, and it's usually very sweet.
Right. A syrup is usually a sweet liquid that contains sugar and other substances, and here we're talking about medicine. And babies often take medicine in the form of syrup because they can't swallow pills. So this pharmacist, who is somebody who prepares and sells medicine and pills and drugs and syrup and so on, he had his own recipe for syrup. So he used this syrup recipe and he mixed it with soda water and began selling the drink at a local soda fountain for 5 cents a glass.
Sounds pretty tasty. Of course, this was way back in 1886, and they had what was called a soda fountain. It was a place you could go to get drinks. You could get soda beverages there, fizzy drinks and things like that. Sort of like going to get your drinks here in Taiwan to get your bubble milk tea or whatever. So, yeah, you could go to a soda fountain there and pay 5 cents and have a glass of this syrup mixed with soda water. And it wasn't until 1916, when World War I was going on, that the drink began to be sold in the famous bottle that bulges outward. Okay, you've probably seen pictures of that bottle before. It's kind of hard to actually buy Coke in that bottle. I've seen it here in Taiwan. Some places have it, but mostly Coke is sold in cans and plastic bottles.
Right, and some people say that it's just not the same. If you buy the original one in the famous bottle that bulges outward, the Coca-Cola will taste better. Now, something that bulges will stick out in a curved shape. So I could say something like, I ate so much for lunch that my stomach began to bulge. And if something is bulging outward, it just means that it's curving in an outward shape. It's going outwards instead of inward. So I can use another sentence to describe outward, which is the car door opened outward. Car doors almost never open inward.
Yeah, that would not work that way. And yeah, bulges outward, that could be your tummy, of course, if you eat too much food. Be careful in about a week's time because you're going to have a big Christmas feast and your stomach might bulge outward if you eat too much. And then after that, you've got to worry about eating too much at Chinese New Year. So yeah, watch the diet there in the next couple of months here. So yeah, the bottle, you know what we're talking about, that glass bottle that kind of sticks out in the middle. It's very iconic of Coca-Cola. And nowadays, you're more likely to see Coca-Cola in a can or plastic bottle, like I just said. But many swear that Coca-Cola always tastes better in a glass bottle, like Helen just said. So there you have it, the origin of Coca-Cola, and maybe even the origin of the bottle itself. And let's move on now to the last portion of our lesson where we summarize everything and we finish things up.
Now that you know the histories of these 3 famous drinks, which one will you reach for when you want to quench your thirst?
最后第3部分我们看到动词 quench 意思是解渴，例如 Ginny quenched her thirst with a glass of lemonade. Ginny 喝了一杯柠檬汁解渴。另外 quench somebody's or something's thirst 这个片语也可以表示满足渴望。举例来说Spending the summer in her grandparents' village helped quench Olga's thirst for a traditional lifestyle. 在祖父母的村子度过夏天，满足了 Olga 对传统生活形态的渴望。
And welcome back. So let's wrap up today's lesson. And it says here, now that you know the histories of these three famous drinks, which one will you reach for when you want to quench your thirst? So we've looked at three famous drinks, Pocari Sweat, 7-Up, and Coca-Cola. And now we know a little bit about their histories, how they came to be invented, the situations in which the inventors were when they came up with these drinks. So now that you know all of this information, which drink would you reach for to quench your thirst?
Right, so now that you know the histories of these drinks, because you know this information now, you have this information now, therefore, what are you going to do? Which one of these beverages are you going to reach for when you want to quench your thirst? Indeed, that's a pretty good question here. Of course, you know, Helen and I are busy explaining the contents of today's lesson, and we're not only getting hungry, but we're getting thirsty as well. So, yes, indeed, we've been talking about Pocari Sweat and 7-Up and Coca-Cola. It's a good question. Now that I'm getting a little thirsty, which drink am I going to reach for when I want to quench my thirst? Quench here, that's kind of a fun word, isn't it?
Yeah, I like the word quench, and it is used quite often in speech and sometimes in writing, and it just basically means to drink something so that you're no longer thirsty. But to quench, you can also use to quench in other situations, such as to quench somebody's curiosity. If you're curious about, let's say, a particular country, let's say, Roger, you're very curious about Spain, right? So to quench your curiosity, just go to Spain, take a trip to Spain so that you will know more about it and you will no longer be curious about it.
Sí, tienes razón, Helen. Me interesa mucho España. But in this particular case, I have an interest in drinks because I'm so thirsty, so I need to quench my thirst. And I did want to remind everybody that we use this word quench mostly for beverages, okay? You can't say you're going to quench your hunger. We wouldn't say that if you're hungry. If you're hungry, I guess you want to satisfy your hunger. But hey, you just ran a marathon, you're really tired and you're really thirsty. You want to quench your thirst. You'd probably have a Pocari Sweat after a marathon.
That's right. I would definitely reach for Pocari Sweat. Now that I think of it, it's a pretty good drink to have.
All right. But, you know, I've kind of slowly over the years stopped drinking these fizzy drinks, these carbonated beverages. And Taiwan, of course, sells all sorts of tea drinks, tea beverages. You can get all different kinds. You can get oolong tea and green tea and dongding oolong and tie guanyin. They all sell those drinks at convenience stores. So I usually quench my thirst with a bottle of cold tea purchased from a convenience store and not Coca-Cola and 7-Up so much.
I agree, because with cold teas that you get at tea shops, you can control the amount of sugar that goes into the drink. So you can request a tea that is low in sugar or just has no sugar at all, whereas with sodas, you can't really control that. And the more sugar you drink, the more you become used to it, and that might not be a good thing. In fact, in America, in some cities, officials have decided to put a sugar tax on sugary drinks so that people will buy less of it and drink less of it.
Supposedly having those sugary drinks will make you fat. And, of course, I think they also say that diet drinks are not necessarily good because they use sugar substitutes, which have their own problems as well. But you get the idea. You can probably pick out your own beverage. And, hey, just in case you wanted to know, we've been talking about the origins of some really popular beverages. Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. It's time now to listen to the Chinese teacher.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。 课文第二部分呢，是关于可口可乐的起源。有一个句子写到It wasn't until 1916 that the drink began to be sold in a famous bottle that bulges outward. 好，这边要介绍的句型是 It wasn't until 什么什么 that 什么什么。那在看这样的句型之前，我们要先来复习两个重点。第一个是It is 或是 it was 什么什么 that 什么什么，这是分列句的句型，可以用来强调句中的某个部分。那用法就是把你原本句子要强调的东西摆在 it is 和 that 之间，或是 it was 和 that 之间，然后把原句剩下的字词摆到 that 之后。所以它的句型就是 it is 或是 it was 加强调的部分，加 that 再加句子的其他部分。第二个要复习的重点是 not until 表示直到什么什么才怎么样，那么后面是可以接表示时间点的名词或是子句。那接着我们就来结合这两个复习的重点，我们用 not until 加名词或是加子句来当做分列句要强调的部分，这时候句子就变成 it is 或是 it was 加 not until 名词或子句，再加 that再加句子的其他部分，去强调说直到某个时间点才怎么样怎么样。好，那以课文的句子来看，它原本可以写作 The drink didn't begin to be sold in a famous bottle that bulges outward until 1916. 把句子里面的 not 和 until 1916拉出来，把它摆到 it was 和 that 之间，然后把句子剩下的字词丢到 that 后方，那这时候句子会写作It was not until 1916 that the drink did begin to be sold 什么什么。好，那我们来看句子里面这个 was 跟 not 可以缩写成 wasn't。再来看到 that 后方的动词部分，我们说 that the drink did begin。 好，本来是 did not begin， 只是 not 被抽到前面去用了嘛，那剩下 did begin。 这时候助动词 did 已经没有存在的必要咯，所以要把这个 did 删掉，然后把 begin 还原成过去式，就会变成课文的句子 It wasn't until 1916 that the drink began to 怎么样怎么样。那我们来造个例句 I didn't get his message until this morning。如果用分列句来强调 not until this morning， 这个句子会写作 It wasn't until this morning that I got his message。 直到今天早上我才收到他的讯息。那顺便补充一个相关句型是 not until 加名词子句加助动词加主词加动词。好，用 not until 当句子的开头，因为这个 not 是否定副词，所以它的主要子句必须倒装，我们要把助动词移到主词前面。那假设主要子句里面它没有助动词，我们就必须根据这个人称和时态在主词前面补上一个助动词。像课文句子可以把它改成 Not until 1916 did the drink begin to 怎么样怎么样。还有我们刚刚说直到早上才收到他的讯息，也可以把它写作 Not until this morning did I get his message。 好，那么以上是今天重点整理，我们回顾今天的单字吧。
Lime. A lime is a green citrus fruit that tastes similar to lemon. Manufacture. Many electronics are manufactured in Taiwan. Syrup. This cafe also sells waffles topped with fruit, whipped cream, and chocolate syrup. Recipe. There are 5 ingredients in this recipe for strawberry cake. Bulge. Henry stuffed so much food into his mouth that his cheeks bulged out. Outward. The vase is narrow but sticks outward at the bottom.
Discussion starter starts now!
Here's our discussion starter for our lesson. Helen, I'll start by asking you, do you drink soda or do you prefer other drinks? And which soda is your favorite?
I enjoy drinking Coca-Cola now and then, but I am not too keen on 7-Up. It is too sweet for me.
Well, you know, every time I go back to visit my parents in the U.S., I always drink lots of root beer. Root beer is really hard to find here in Taiwan, and I just love so much to go back and have a big icy mug of A&W root beer or whatever. It really hits the spot. Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Roger.
I'm Helen.
See you next time.